Welcome to the Regen Brands podcast. This is a place for consumers, operators, and investors to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we have Jason Freeman, who is the CEO of Farmer Direct Organic. Farmer Direct Organic is supporting regenerative agriculture with its oats, beans, lentils, and pea products that are all certified organic, with a growing selection transitioning to Regenerative Organic Certified. In this episode, we learn about the brand's journey from being the sales arm of a 3-farmer Canadian co-op to a nationally distributed brand working with more than 60 organic farmers in Canada, the US, and Mexico. Jason gives us a peek behind the curtain on all things organic grain production, plus he shares how the brand is partnering with farms to help transition their acreage to Regenerative Organic Certified. Jason truly gave us a behind-the-scenes look on this one and shared the very cool 20-year history behind FDO. We hope you enjoy it. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands podcast. I am flying solo today, but very fired up to have our friend Jason Freeman with us here from Farmer Direct Organic. So welcome, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. I think this is our first Canadian-based brand on the Regen Brands platform. So you get to wear that badge of honor today, man.
Oh, right on. I should have had my Maple Leaf t-shirt on or something like that.
Well,
that's awesome, man.
We can throw up the flag behind you. Maybe our editor can handle helping us out with that or something.
Right on. That'd be sweet.
Well, to kick us off, bro, for those that aren't super familiar with the brand, just give us a quick overview. What is the brand? What do y'all make? What do y'all sell? Where can some people find you today?
Okay, Farmer Direct Organic. We're a 100% organic brand. We don't do natural or conventional grains, all certified organic. So lentils, peas, beans, hemp, and we have an awesome line of Regen Organic Certified gluten-free rolled oat products. So you can find us in the bulk bins at Whole Foods Market. You can also find us on the shelf at Whole Foods Market as we're doing a private label with them for Regen Organic Certified French green lentils and red split lentils.
Wow.
And yeah, that was really exciting. It's going well. Just a little bit on that. It blew by their projections double. So gave us what they thought was the annual volume, and they doubled it. So that was fantastic. You can find our branded products or 1-pound shelf packs, independent retailers, NCG participating national co-op grocery retailers, and a bunch of chains across the U.S. It's still a very natural foods channel, right? So we're not in the Walmarts or the Krogers or anything like that yet. But you should be able to find us in your natural health foods, local health food store. And if you can't, ask for it. We're actually the #1 selling brand for dried beans in the natural foods channel, according to Spins, for the past 2 years running.
Congratulations.
And yeah, thank you. I think it's really a response to our mission of organic integrity. So like I said previously, the brand's 100% organic. We only source from US and Canadian farmers. We started sourcing chickpeas from Mexican farmers because we're not growing enough of the chickpeas organically in the US or Canada. But we don't offshore anything that we can grow here. So meaning we don't purchase anything that we can grow in North America. I'm actually excited to reach out and start developing relationships with Mexican farmers because they have a really great organic scene down there.
Yeah.
We'd love to support Mexican organic family farms. Everything that we produce is traceable back to the family farm. So there's a lot code on the back of the bag. You can email us and we'll tell you where that product came from. All our product is single origin. So if you purchase that bag of French green lentils from us, it comes from one farm. We don't mix lots. And everything we sell, we test for pesticides. So that's again part of our organic integrity mission. Not all organic brands test for pesticides. We have direct relationships with our farmers, but still, you want to do the testing. and also just to see what's going on their farm. So like, how much are their neighbors spraying? Are they starting to get drift? And so then we can tell our farmer, hey, you had a bit of residue. So talk to your neighbor, ask them to, hey, don't spray on windy days, for example. And actually, a lot of organic farmers are starting to reach out to their neighbors. And because organics is where it's at right now, there's a lot more respect in the farming community for it. So there's, some are having, good success with their neighbors, just educating them about, organics and what happens when their neighbors spray pesticides when it's too windy and things like that.
Well, man,
so
you must be an avid podcast listener, because you just teed me up for about 20 follow-up things. So, I appreciate that.
Nice.
The origin story, you were starting to talk about the farms and supporting the family farms, and the origin story is, and I'll let you tell it, is really there was a farmer co-op established, or you help establish it. But just before we get too much into the brand, take us into that origin story and share kind of how the whole thing came about.
Well, it all started literally back in 1994.
Wow.
So I had a very, very good friend of mine that got thrown in jail for 6 weeks for blockading a logging road.
Wow.
It is a crazy story. She was up in one of those tripods, like they built a tripod in a tree, right? So they couldn't cut the trees, similar to Julia butterfly thing going on. And she was up in that tree for I don't know how many months. And it is an interesting story. At one point in time, like it was during the winter, and it's just like damp and snowy, and she's cold, and she's thinking to herself, I'm not going to survive another night up here. Like, I'm getting cold, and everything is wet. My sleeping bag is wet. My clothes are wet. Anyway, she managed to fall asleep. She had this dream that there was a fire underneath her platform, right? And she woke up in the morning, and everything was dry. Her sleeping bag was dry. Her clothes were dry.
Wow.
So, it's like, people believe in those things or not, right? It's a story, right? She's my friend, totally trust her, and, stranger things happen on this earth. But that was really interesting. And the good news is that they actually saved that area of wilderness. It was this beautiful old watershed called the Ilaho Valley. And the really cool thing about it is, too, the forestry company got together with the indigenous nation up there that it's on their ancestral lands, and plus the government and the activists, and they came up with a really good forest use plan. And
that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a success story. The watershed is still standing. They're selectively logging it, which I absolutely approve on. Instead of just going and clear cutting it, they're taking like really high value lumber, making stuff out of it. Selling it for a lot more money, creating more jobs downstream, and keep the forest standing. So everyone was really happy about that. But, she had to spend 6 weeks in jail, for that to happen, along with a few other, co-conspirators. So, that affected me a lot. And a friend of mine said, well, you can make paper out of hemp. And so I was thinking to myself, oh, wow, that's amazing. We don't have to cut down trees anymore. I was very young at this point in time, like 23, 24. I quickly realized I didn't have the $150 million to build a hemp pulp and paper mill. And then I also realized that, the technology wasn't really there to do that.
Yeah.
But I still kind of got on that hemp train. Started a hemp store, the New Westminster Hemp Company, with a bunch of guys to kind of get that ball rolling. That's an interesting story in itself. We actually were the first people to advertise a vaporizer in High Times magazine. That was back in 1994, 1995. We called it the Vaportron. We started manufacturing it ourselves. It was really cool. It was super low tech, but it was super cool. And we started doing really well. We're selling hundreds of units across the border. Americans really liked it. Well, vaping, right? It took off, right? As we know. Problem was that it was high season. It was Christmas, and we were shipping the product across the border as tobacco paraphernalia. Well, we
Mm.
don't know what happened, but we think one of the border guards maybe got a hold of High Times magazine, saw our ad in High Times magazine, and went like, "Hey, this isn't tobacco paraphernalia. This is cannabis paraphernalia."
Yeah.
And so they literally like stopped all our products at the border. I think we had like something like 500 or 1,000 units that were stopped at the border and basically seized. So we're, young company, whatnot, that just, crashed the company. So unfortunately, the company didn't work out. But then a friend of mine said, "Hey, there's this guy that's trying to, he's got a small lobbying firm that's trying to legalize hemp in Canada." So I went and met that guy, got the job as a sales manager. And so from 1996, I'll get to the Farmer Direct story.
I was about to say, this is, I love it.
This is an interesting story in itself. So from 1996 to 1998, I worked for the small events and marketing lobbying firm called out of Vancouver, Canada, called Wiseman Noble Sales and Marketing. And what we were doing is we were trying to we were lobbying the government to legalize industrial hemp in Canada. And to do that, we had a really interesting strategy. First, separate the issues. So we didn't talk about cannabis. This wasn't about cannabis. This is about industrial hemp. It's about farmers and tractors and planting seed and genetics and food and fiber and clothing. And so we separated the issues and we created a skeleton infrastructure for the industry, which comprised of quarterly trade journal called Commercial Hemp Magazine, a bunch of regional trade shows and conferences, and then a yearly national trade show and conference called the Commercial Industrial Hemp Symposium. We did that for 2 years. It worked out really well. We got like sponsorship from a major Canadian bank, the BC Ministry of Agriculture, Health Canada, which was the federal department that oversaw hemp. After 2 years of lobbying and trade shows and magazines, the Canadian government legalized industrial hemp.
Wow.
So at that point in time, the company's mandate was basically finished. So I was like, okay, well, we can grow hemp now. So I contacted some of the farmers that had exhibited at our trade shows, and these are organic farmers. And I said, "Hey guys," because by that point in time, I was into organic food. I started eating organic food in 1995 because I was having various health issues from basically eating garbage before, like fast food and stuff like that. So I cleaned up my act, started to feel better. And I was like, man, this organic stuff is awesome. And so I talked to the farmers and said, well, hey, if you can come with $40,000 down payment for this planting seed, we'll grow hemp for you. So I came up with that money somehow. I got some stockbrokers, believe it or not, to provide us with that money.
Yeah.
That's a whole crazy story too. And so we did that and formed a company called BioHemp. BioHemp was the first brand to have a line of certified organic hemp seed food. So we had oil, we had flour, we had roasted hemp seeds. The first brand to actually come up with a SKU, like one SKU of organic hemp foods. I think it was Omega Nutrition when they came out with their oil. But we were the first to actually come up with a full product line. So I started that in Vancouver in 1999. Because all of our processors and farmers were basically in Saskatchewan, I moved out to Saskatchewan in May of 2000. In May of 2001, I sold that company. And 3 of the farmers that we had been purchasing organic hemp seed from came to me and said, hey, we have like lentils and peas and things like that and wheat. And, will you market that for us? And so I said to them, if you guys form a cooperative, I'll manage your sales, marketing, and logistics for you for a fixed percentage of sale. And they're like, yeah, that's okay. That's a good idea. We'll do that. So that started in 2002 as Farmer Direct Co-op. Started with 3 farmers. By 2009, we had about 60 farmers in a co-op.
Wow.
But that's, and our sole business, our only business was commodity sales, like organic commodity sales. So we'd sell, say, truckloads of large green lentils to Amy's Kitchen, who would then make soup out of it.
Right.
But in 2009-ish, when the financial collapse hit, the commodity markets, both conventional and organic, just completely just went upside down. Demand evaporated, prices crashed. And so we were like, what are we going to do now?
Right.
And, the co-op was in debt. And we didn't really have much money. And we were like, well, we need to find more stable, higher margin markets. So let's get into the retail. But because we had no money, it's like, well, what can we do? And we're like, well, we don't have any money to develop products. We don't have any money for an ad campaign with beautiful new packaging and whatnot.
Let's get into the more expensive side of the business with way less money. I love that strategy.
Totally. Brilliant strategy, right? So we were like, what can we do? And we're like, well, we can bag our grains in 25-pound bags for retailer bulk bins. And then we started thinking, going, okay, if we're going to do this, let's like really do this. Because something about Farmer Direct Co-op, which is not going to really be perceptible from the outside, is that it was really a meeting of farmer and organic consumer. So of course I was the organic consumer, and meeting with the organic farmers. And as an organic consumer, I was always a little like thinking to myself, well, why isn't organic also fair? So, I go to the store and you can buy organic coffee, you can buy fair trade coffee, you can buy organic fair trade coffee. And so thinking to myself, well, why can't people buy organic fair trade lentils? The issues are a bit different, but also like between North and South, global North and global South, but they're also very much the same, being that, you have a number of large companies that control most of the commodity trade, which really dictates the price to the farmers. And it's the same in North America. And then North America had the added issue is that even on organic farms, there's a lot of issues with farm labor and rights of farm laborers, and even with the farmers and the organic buyers, there's not necessarily fairness there. The contracts aren't necessarily fair, and the product's organic, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's fair. So we decided that, okay, we're going to get domestic fair trade certified. We want to be the first national brand to be domestic fair trade certified. So we went around. This is an interesting story too. So I went over to a trade show called BioFact. Must have been about 2000 and I think I even started working on it before the financial collapse, around 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And we went to a meeting of Fair Trade Labeling Organization. So they're the oldest fair trade certification governing body. And we went into the meeting all like, yeah, we're excited. I'm sure they're going to be excited about us expanding fair trade to domestic farmers. So we got there, we talked to them, and they said just, no, we're absolutely not interested. Stay away from the market, stay away from fair trade. And they said, if you're going to do it, whatever you do, don't call it fair trade. That's our name, right? And so, I looked at that and I was like, okay, fair enough, right? I'm going to respect that because, that's what they want us to do. And, I'm not trying to be predatory, trying to cooperate with the community. And, I looked at it and said, you know what, maybe we should come up with our own thing anyways, right? Instead of just try to get certified from them. So we decided that, okay, we're going to look for a group that's doing it right. And we came across a group called the Agricultural Justice Project, which had a domestic fair trade standard, which is really robust.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it too, which was really cool, is that the Agricultural Justice Project was owned and controlled by farmers and farm workers. So it was really a standard. Cool. Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. It's a standard that was actually developed by the very people it's supposed to help and aid, versus say Fair Trade USA, which basically completely co-opted the fair trade label, decided to make their own rules, completely corporate run. Even when their licensee holders get busted for violations, they do nothing unless there's a huge public backlash.
Yeah.
So we're like, we want to do this properly. And so we, about 2011, we got certified by the Agricultural Justice Project. And then we started going to the market with our 25-pound bags, the bulk bins. And our tagline, I'm really proud of this because I don't know if anyone is doing this yet. And it was like, as an organic consumer, I was like, this is the fucking bomb.
Yeah.
Sorry, I swore. You may have to edit that
No,
out.
you're fine.
I was like, this is the bomb. And so what our attributes were, we were 100% farmer owned, we were 100% domestic fair trade, and we are 100% organic.
Wow.
And so I went out in the marketplace like this. And in 2013, we got a call from Whole Foods Market. Actually, I don't know if Errol Schweizer rings a bell.
Yeah, I know Errol.
He was, yeah, so he's all over the place now on tons of boards, and he's got an article in Forbes magazine, and so he Errol and his buying partner Dwight Richmond, who were basically head buyers for grocer at Whole Foods Market, probably did more to launch new, innovative, ethical brands in North America than anyone that I know of. The work they did was phenomenal, and so they reached out to us. This is another funny story. Thorough reached out to say, we're really interested in your product. We think what you're doing is great. So I totally blew him off. I was like, it's Whole Foods. It's just stupid, right? Like, Whole Foods Market, they're going to like just cannibalize us. They're going to destroy us. They're too big. Did
you have, Jason, did you have like good representation in the natural channel? And so you're just worried about like kind of playing with the big guy when you had like other mom and pops? Like, what was the concern?
Oh no, we had next to nothing. We had a few Canadian retailers. It was just not. It wasn't.
It just didn't click for you at the time.
Yeah, and like I fully acknowledged my supreme ignorance for that. Right? It's straight up stupid of me. Yeah. And but through my hemp activism and work, I'd met David Bronner. Yeah. Right. And so I had a relationship with David Bronner, and he found out what went on, and he basically reached out to me and said, "Hey, dude, like, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah, they're really good. They're a really good retailer. They've been really good to us. Hey, at Expo West this year, I want to introduce you to one of their board members. You can talk to them and this and that." Yeah. So I met one of their board members, and I talked to him, and I heard David out, and I was like, "Okay, I'm being unreasonable here." Yeah, great. So we started selling into Whole Foods Market. We're thinking, they're going to buy, a few pallets a month or whatnot. It ended up turning into 5 to 7 truckloads a month of business.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was, and they were really good to us. They protected us. So what I mean by that is we had a Whole Foods Market exclusive. Mm-hmm. And what a Whole Foods Market exclusive means is that when you ship to the United Natural Foods distribution centers, Whole Foods Market can only pick that product. The other retailers can't pick that product. Now, that may sound like a bad thing, right? Mm-hmm. But it was a good thing for us because we were fairly small, and we were like, just keeping up with managing to sell the Whole Foods Market, right? Keep our fulfillment rates up. And Whole Foods Market also said to us, there'll be a point in time where we can release the exclusive, right? Mm-hmm. So, so that went really well. We're selling tons of them. The co-op literally went from like $1 million in debt to $1 million in profit and retained earnings. And so we were going really strong. And
Jason, was the supply there when that demand trigger happened, or did you kind of have to scramble to add more farmers and bring people into the co-op? Or I'm sure it was, not all perfect, but like, what was the supply demand relationship in that growth period?
Well, because we were shipping commodities, so truckloads of, say large green lentils or peas to Amy's Kitchen, we had a decent supplier base. We had 60 members, 60. And so we were able to meet that demand and then plan for it, get more acres in. So that was pretty good, actually. The supply side worked out really well. Yeah. And so this is 2013. We started selling the Whole Foods Market. 2016, I asked my board. I was the general manager, and I asked my board to hire another general manager so I could just focus on sales, because the exclusive relation was about to end. We had a bunch of other retailers that were interested. I was literally about to hop on a plane and go and pitch a bunch of retailers and start expanding the brand. Unfortunately, the general manager they hired was from the conventional industry and didn't know organics very well or CPG, and we just clashed, right? This is, just for example, for lunch, you would routinely come to work with McDonald's and Red Bull.
Yeah.
And it's like,
just not the right fit.
It's not the right fit. And like, it's trying to suggest to him, hey, you should, if you're going to be a GM of an organic fair trade co-op, you start to maybe, eat some of these things and whatnot.
Yeah.
He had health issues. He had health issues too, right? So, and, but I'm not a counselor. I'm a bit of a brash entrepreneur. So, I didn't communicate my concern for his health properly. And he said, okay, I don't like you. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like you either. And we're like, so let's, I've been here for 14 years. Maybe it's time for me to leave. And he's like, yeah, it's time for you to leave.
Wow.
And so I negotiated, a fair severance package with the board. One thing I should mention to any entrepreneurs out there, whether you're for profit or nonprofit, I started something that I literally had no control of, meaning no equity stake, no shares, right? It was farmers co-op. There was no employee shares. There was no, or equity. There was no employee representative on the board. So, just be careful, right? Because if you do that and you create something, and you're going to find yourself basically kicked out on the street, because if you build something which people like, don't want to try to take it from you, right? So, and essentially that happened, but whatever, no hard feelings. It was an amazing experience. Got to meet so many people, got to learn to trim, and this more than I'd ever thought I would learn about grain and supply chains and cleaning grain. That's another thing, cleaning grain, right? When you go to the bulk bins or the retail shelf and you buy a bag of grain, the process that goes into cleaning it is just insane. It's easier if you're making soup or you're making flour, you can grind stuff up, but if you're putting a product on the shelf, people are expecting it to be just beautiful, right? Can't have like one wild oat in it, and now with the gluten-free and gluten intolerance, it's even more intense. I just thought it was really interesting. So just so people know, it's a dry process when we take grain, say, a bean or a pea or a lentil, and it goes through first aspiration. So you got air that puffs onto it. So it takes all the light stuff off, like, any dust or chaff. And then it goes into a gravity, and not necessarily, each cleaning plant will have it in different orders. And then it goes into a gravity table, which are really interesting machines, which basically sift the grains and say things that aren't grain. You can target a grain out basically through gravity. And then you have your indents, which do it by size. And then you have your color sorters, which literally are electric eyes, and they have channels, and the grain goes down the channels individually, right? So if you can think of this machine with, like, say 10, 12 channels, each for individual grains, and the electric eye will look at that as the grain goes through its scanner, and if it's not targeted grain, it shoots a puff of air out and then pushes that out of the stream. And then also the last one that a lot of plants have now is X-ray machines. So the grain will go through the X-ray machine, and anything that is metal or gets or is not like grain, again, gets puffed out. Now, for people concerned about, like, oh, what about radiation? It's got like 1,000 times less radiation than the machine that your dentist has. So it's like super safe. It's organically certified, these processes. So then, that's just the whole grain cleaning thing.
Yeah, take us finish the story, because there's a happy ending of you coming back, right? So you separate, and now you're back. So what? Fill in the blanks there.
So 2016, I leave. I get a decent severance package, enough for me to go, like, after 14 years, I actually take a vacation. So I went down to the Caribbean. I'm sitting there, just literally with a drink in my hand next to the pool, right? Just loving life. And I get back to my hotel room. I start getting calls from farmers because, of course, the board didn't really communicate why I left. The members still had relationships with me,
Yeah.
and they're like, "What the hell's going on?" And this is the thing too about farmers. If you're ever going to get into selling grain or vegetables or anything, the farmers really build the connection with the person that's selling their grain, that's talking to them on the phone, that's making the deal. So, and not necessarily the company, so that if people, and especially in organics, it's more niche.
Yeah.
If a person leaves a company and goes elsewhere, the farmers want to know where they went, and they'll do business with them again because, like, well, this guy was always, he was straight up with me. When there's issues, he was straight up with me, and that's the big thing too, right? Sometimes there's issues, right? There's quality issues, there's payment issues, and so the bottom line, if you're going to get into this with farmers, you have to communicate, even bad news, all the time. So so I'm sitting there, farmers are phoning me, emailing me, what's going on. And so then I phoned up a friend of mine who also trades grain. He's actually a former employee of ours. And I said, hey, I'm getting calls from these farmers. They want us to sell their grain still. And I said, do you want to form a grain selling company? And so he's like, yeah, let's do it. So we formed something called Organic Trade Solutions. And so Organic Trade Solutions is still around today. It sells organic commodities to food manufacturers. And so we were doing this for about 2 years, 2018. We were buying crops from a lot of the farmers in the co-op too, some farmers outside the co-op. And then in 2018, the board of Farmer Direct came to me and said, hey, the general manager we hired, the retail is way over his head. And, quite frankly, it's way over our heads too. We just want to farm, grow the best grain in the world, sell it to a trusted company. So will you buy the brand off of us and keep purchasing our grain from us? So I said, okay, let's do it. So I bought the brand from them, relaunched as Farmer Direct Organic Food in 2018. And so, of course, our attributes changed. We're no longer a farmer owned. So, but as an organic consumer, I was like, okay, there's a few other things that have popped up that, organics isn't addressing that we need to address, such as pesticide testing and traceability. Because by that point in time, in 2018, in the marketplace, there is, let's just, I don't want to sugarcoat it. There is a tremendous amount of fraud, organic fraud. You had people,
especially in grains. I think that's probably where it's been the worst, right?
Grains was absolutely horrible. There was this Turkish company that basically, some people, so there's
a big Wall Street. There's a big Wall Street Journal article about it, right? We can link to that in the show notes. Why is the traceability such a challenge when it's imported versus like when it's domestic, or is it the same?
So a few things happen, and both imported fraud and domestic fraud, it just comes down to the same thing, is that the USDA and the organic certification companies were taking it seriously. USDA did an absolutely atrocious job at clamping down on fraud, to the point where the USDA wasn't even enforcing the law. With the domestic fraud, is actually your prosecution services. I think your federal prosecutors that said, hey, we're breaking the law, we're going to do something about it. So people probably, if they're familiar with organics, probably heard of that massive, I think it was something like $150 million corn and soy domestic fraud scam. It was that farmer who committed suicide when he finally got busted. I don't know if you heard about that. Right, he finally got busted and committed suicide, which is really tragic. But it just goes to show that 95% of the people are honest. They'll follow the rules, but you're always going to have that 5% that are like, are you kidding me? You mean I just have to take this grain and put it in the organic bin and lie to my auditor? And it's good. So there was a company out of Turkey, And what they were doing is literally they were importing conventional lentils from Saskatchewan into Turkey, cleaning it through their, like, I wouldn't mean clean, I mean more like laundering. The conventional through their facility and then selling as organic to the European market. And the reason they were caught was because some of these European companies started testing for glyphosate. And they started to find out that glyphosate was through the roof. And so they started testing more and more, and then they basically found that, you know, this company was doing fraudulent activity. They got busted. They got their certification taken away, but I think for only 3 months it was suspended until they got another certifier. And you know, they claim, like, this is a true story. They claim that, oh, we're really sorry, we messed up. We thought that auger was going to the conventional bin, but it was actually going to the organic bin.
Yeah, sure.
You know, so that's another thing too with, like, us being 100% organic company. We don't dabble in conventional and natural grains. So, you know, when grain comes into a warehouse, it's organic grain. There's no opportunity to commingle. All of our farms are 100% organic. We don't allow parallel production. Parallel production is when a farm will have some organic land, some conventional land, and say they'll grow peas on both that land. Well, you know, the opportunity to commingle, even if it's an accident, right? And not straight out fraud, just too much, right? So we're really particular with the farmers that we purchase from. So you know, 2008 fraud is an issue. I should note too that finally, after, like, God knows, probably 10 years, probably longer, because organic fraud's been happening for a while, the USDA finally starting to clamp down. They're getting harder on the imports. They're bringing back something called transaction certificates, which I think are really important. You know, they're a pain in the ass for the buyers and the sellers of the brands, but they're really important, because what the transaction certificate is, every time a farmer sells grain, he has to send a transaction certificate to a certifier. The certifier verifies that transaction certificate and then sells it to the buyer, or sends that certificate to the buyer. Now we can sell the product. Why is this important? It's important because the certifier will look at the farmer's organic audit from that year and go, like, okay, well, that farmer put in 500 acres of peas. Okay. Well, we have transaction certificates for 10,000 metric tons of peas. There's no bloody way he grew 10,000 metric tons on 500 acres. So that's how they really clamp down on some of the more egregious fraud. You know, they're not going to be able to clamp down, you know, if that farmer, you know, is desperate and he buys, you know, a few hundred bushels of conventional peas from his neighbor and blends that in. But that also is very, you know, stuff like that doesn't necessarily happen. And the reason too, and for the conventional farmers, you know, give them kudos for this, but, you know, they know that's illegal. So if their organic neighbor tries to do that, they're not going to be so comfortable participating. And they're probably going to out the organic farmer. And there has been a lot of times where conventional neighbors have called certifiers and say, hey, I think there's funny business going on. But anyway, so that's on the fraud part. So in 2018, you know, as a organic consumer, acknowledging that there's issues with fraud in organics, and because we're no longer farmer owned, it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do, right? How are we going to elevate the brand so we really tackle this, and so people know that, you know, they're actually eating organic food. So instead of being 100% farmer owned, 100% organic, and 100% domestic fair trade, we're 100% organic, 100% traceable back to the family farm, and 100% pesticide tested. So all the grain that we purchase is pesticides, traceable back to the family farm. So we have a number of levels to assure organic integrity. And so it's worked out really well. You know,
Jason, the brand does all the processing and owns the infrastructure in the facility that does that, or is there a farmer co-op that still does that and the brand just buys raw materials from them, or how's that set up?
So when we were a farmer direct co-op, we had seed cleaners that we worked with, so organic certified seed cleaners, so third parties that we worked with. And so we basically maintained the same supply chains, but with the added benefit is that we've added our own infrastructure now. So we have our
Okay.
own warehousing, we have our own packing,
Nice.
we have our own oat rolling and oat milling.
Hmm.
So, but to your point, that's where you want to get to. If
Yeah.
I was to ever do this differently again,
Yeah.
not
From scratch.
necessarily, yeah, if do it scratch, assuming that I'd be able to raise the capital, which is a whole other
Right.
issue, I would
Right.
build the cleaning facility and the packing facility and, have all of that under one roof, as a vertically integrated
Which,
brand and process.
just so people have an idea, how much million per $1 million of sales would that facility need to be? Like a $5 million facility for $50 million a year in annual revenue? Like, just give us a ballpark number or something.
Yeah, nowadays, if we want to do it really well, including like oat rolling, and some, you can spend $10-20 million on a mill. Just probably
Yeah.
spend more if you wanted to.
But you could scale that to
Including
how much annual revenue? If you spent 20
if,
million,
if
let's
you,
just call it.
yeah, if you spent 20 million, you probably should be able to do about 200 million a year
Yeah.
in annual revenue.
Okay. That makes sense
So
to me. Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, and so it's 2018. That was interesting time too, because the farmers ran into trouble. They it's really interesting. Anyone who's has a brand or aspiring to have a brand, don't do this. So what the GM that they hired started doing when their sales started to falter, because they just weren't. It's a very sophisticated marketplace. You have to keep up with it. It's not easy,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
if you just parachute into it from and what he was doing before Farmer Direct Co-op, he was literally at a large inland terminal, negotiating with farmers about their GMO canola, which you purchase from them, elevate it, throw it into a rail car, and ship it out. Right? Just
Super transferable
very,
to a niche organic brand, sounds like.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Not at all. And so when sales start faltering, what did he do? Or sales are faltering. We need to generate more revenue. Okay, let's raise our prices.
Hmm.
So, at a certain point in time, Whole Foods Market, their biggest client, was going like, no, we're not going to buy from you anymore. This is
Yeah.
ridiculous. So
Yeah.
the brand was in trouble when we purchased it. So the first thing we did was we went down Whole Foods Market, had an office, had a meeting. And I was like, okay, what, hey guys, how's it doing? You remember me, right? And they remember me from before.
Yeah.
Glad to have you back. I'm like, okay, what can we do here? What can we salvage here?
Mhm.
Which SKUs can we salvage? And so, we got back on track with Whole Foods Market, and that was good, and it kind of, saved the brand. So that's 2018, and then ran the brand for 3 years, and then I was just going like, man, like if we want to, because we're still in the same situation. Everything we had was,
Mhm.
we had a warehouse, and we were bagging our products in 25-pound bags, 1 pound shelf packs, but we didn't have any oat rolling, didn't have any cleaning. We could have used more capital. And,
Mhm.
I was just looking at this saying it's going to take us decades before we're able to raise the money to actually build our own mill.
Yeah.
So so that's when we started to look to sell the company. So we're looking around to sell the company. And then, thankfully, this Saskatchewan-based grain trader, much
Mm.
more larger company than us, came on and said, we
Mhm.
love what you guys are doing. We think organics is going to be the future of agriculture.
Mm.
There's a lot we can learn from it. We're trying to get our conventional farmers to reduce their pesticide use, their fertilizer use, their fuel use. And some of them are starting to adopt some practices from organic, like
Mhm.
crop rotation.
Mhm.
And so, we negotiated with them. One of the things I had in negotiations, because I was like, okay, we sell the company, what's going to happen? So 2001, sold the company. Part of the contract is, and over time you can't really enforce these things, but you want to
Mhm.
know who you're dealing with. And I put in the contract, you're not going to dilute the brand. It's always going to stay 100% organic.
Mm.
They agreed to that.
That's
And the
big.
really cool thing, yeah, it's huge, right?
Yeah.
It's huge because it's so easy to go like, okay, great, we're going to take this brand, it's organic, man. Let's bring in the premium or the natural
Yeah. Right.
grains. We're going to literally make 30% more margin, you guys.
Mhm.
Let's do it, right? And so that's
Mhm.
why they do it. But not only did they support organic, when Whole Foods Market came to us and said, hey, have you guys heard of Regen Organic Certification? We're really interested. I'm like, no, I haven't, but I looked into it. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And they're like, if you can get some of your farmers certified, we'll like buy products from you. So that's how we got the private labels with Whole Foods Market. So not only did they, the company is called Above Food. Not only did they have they honored the organic integrity to this point, they even invested substantially into ROC, Regen Organic Certification. So we get up and running, so we could develop a farmer pool for that. So that was really great. So far, so good.
Talk more about exactly what that means, Jason, because the Regen Brands podcast, we're talking about regenerative now, we're talking about ROC.
Okay.
So let's dive a little bit deeper there, right? Like, give us a little more color on how that came about. It sounds like Whole Foods kind of brought it to you. I'm sure you talked to David and the whole kind of ROA Elizabeth kind of crew. Did the company that now owns the brand kind of sponsor some of the farmer certification fees? Did they help with technical assistance? Like, just walk us through the whole process.
Well, you nailed it on the head right there. So, I went back to my board and I was like, look, if we're going to do this, it's a new certification. So the farmers are going to want a number of things. And so I think we should offer them, we're going to pay for the certification. So what we said to the farmers, like, we'll pay for the certification up front. Okay. And then if you have a crop failure, you don't owe us the certification fees. But when you have a crop, then we'll take the certification fee off of like our payment to you. The farmers are fine with that because they're like,
That's
okay,
fair.
well, you're taking off the risk on the certification fee, and they're getting a significant premium on those products. So the first year that we did it was awesome, and from the farmer's perspective, because the prevailing price for organic oats was about $6 a bushel. You can maybe get $7.50, $8 a bushel if you had gluten-free status. So for the ROC, we went out really strong to incentivize the farmers. And we were like $12 a bushel, you guys. So like literally double.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was $12 a bushel, and we'll give you a bit of a premium if you can hit gluten-free status. Not a huge premium, 25 cents a bushel, but it's premium nonetheless.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of uptake, obviously. The farmers were like, yeah, damn straight. We're going to go through this certification. And so we covered that. We also hired a consultant, awesome woman named Marion McBride, who's actually an organic family farmer. And she was the founding president of Trans-Canada Organic Certification, which was a shoot off from OCIA International, which I don't know if your podcast listeners will understand those acronyms, but if you do, gives a bit more color to the story. But she, amazing woman, she's accomplished a lot of things in her life, and she helped our farmers with the agricultural justice product, domestic fair trade certification back in the day when we were farmer direct co-op. So she provided the technical support for farmers to transition to ROC from organic. So we provided that. We had other staff members who, allocated resources to just really focus on getting that pool of farmers together and running it.
Jason, what percentage of the farmers would you say are really already ROC? They just need to be certified versus they would have to add or change certain parts of their operation? Like, what percentage of the sourcing pool is like ready, just needs certs versus like we'd have to work with them on the technical side a little bit?
Most of our farmers, especially in Canada, are very, very near ROC certification. So the only things that many of them needed were contracts with their farm labor. And some of them had to add a few more cover crops to their rotation. But in speaking with them, it was great for them too, because they realized that they needed to, to increase their fertility.
Because the things
other things
that they're already doing is they're already rotating a ton of crops, right? They're probably already cover cropping somewhat. You mentioned that. Are most of them, I'm assuming most of them are limited till, right? Or no till, because it's organic. So I'm assuming there's some tillage, but just give us a flavor for what the average farmer y'all source from is doing.
Yeah, so they're doing a lot of rotation. Obviously, the standard rotation on the prairies is you have and not in any particular order. The farmer will figure this out themselves, but you have an oil seed like a hemp or a flax or a mustard seed. You have a cereal grain like an oats, a barley, or a wheat. You have a legume crop. So that would be the rotation. So, like, say 4-year
That's
rotation.
cool.
This is what would go through in one field, right?
Yeah.
So first they start with the oil seed, then the cereal crop, then the legume crop, and then a plow down crop. So clover or alfalfa. And a few things about ROC certification is soil testing is mandatory. So under organics, there's no soil testing. So I really like that because we're getting to the age of more data for organics. So after about 10 years time, we'll be able to go back to the farmers, or even 5 years, and say, okay, well, this is what soil tests are saying regarding fertility of soil. And which may explain if their yields are low, or may explain if yields are really high, right? Doing the right thing.
Yeah, it should be of service to the farmer just as it's of service to the consumer, right? And the verification process of the certification.
Absolutely. There's no parallel production allowed. There's still parallel production allowed under the NOP. When you get into things like animal husbandry, they have really strict rules, which I think are brilliant. So, for example, ROC has, and some of our farmers have livestock and grain.
I was about to say, I'm assuming most of them can't, but do some of them integrate?
Well, this is the tragic part of it. Most of, I'd say back in the day, a majority of farmers on the prairies had livestock and grain.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, right?
Yeah.
The livestock is absolutely, there's another thing about the whole debate about like cows. Cows are bad, right?
Yeah.
So we say it's not the cow, it's the how.
Right.
There is no single better way to produce soil and therefore get that carbon that's in the air back into the soil cycle than manure.
Yeah, it's like it's either synthetic or natural fertility. Why would natural not be better, right?
Oh, totally. The issue with cows, of course, is the feedlot system and the industrial system that we put them in.
Right.
So, and this is probably for another podcast with somebody else much more knowledgeable than me. But what the U.S. and Canada desperately needs a system of a locally appropriately scaled slaughter and packing facilities for pasture-based agriculture.
For sure.
Right. Because
1,000%.
Right. Yeah. Right now, like in Canada, it's brutal, man. There's Brooks, Alberta plant, 5,000 head of cattle go through there a day. It sucks up all the supply. At the same time, every time they have a hiccup, E. coli or whatever, so they have to shut down the plant. It just destroys the whole supply chain.
Yep.
The prices collapse. Farmers can't bring their cows to market. And because of the roller coaster of the whole cattle markets, a lot of farmers just got out. They couldn't afford it, right? So there goes your fertility, right? So, but one of the things that the ROC does, which is great, is that I just think is a brilliant standard, is that they restrict the genetics you can use when raising animals. So, for example, one of the big issues in poultry is that they've bred these I was about to say pigs. They've bred these chickens so much that everyone's seen the pictures of the chickens that can't stand on their legs because their breasts are so large, right? Totally inhumane. Under ROC, you can't use those breeds. You have to have breeds that grow appropriately, to the genetics of the animal. Things like that. Under USDA NOP, there really is not much of anything regarding farmers or farm worker rights. ROC has some of that. For example, all our farmers had to create contracts for their farm workers, which is really great, right? The exploitation in Canada on grain farms and in the US on grain farms is, it's very low versus say fruit or vegetable farms. You have a lot less farm employees. A lot of them are, neighbors, for example. Some of them
you probably have a lot less like H-2A and like immigrant workforce, right? That is easier to exploit, unfortunately.
Totally. But it's still important to bring those standards in to signal to the rest of organics that, hey, it's not acceptable if your organic vegetables are being harvested by people being exploited.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, right? So for all those reasons, we really liked ROC, and we felt that ROC was kind of like bringing organics back to 2002 organic standard before Congress
the
started
aspirational beacon it was supposed to be,
yeah.
like what it's really supposed to stand for, and the standard it's supposed to set.
Yeah. So, and that's what we wanted to get into. Well, wanted to get into ROC for those two reasons. One, we had demand from major retailer, and two, we felt it was the right thing to do for our brand.
And you
it's been really
you have since launched some of those SKUs with Whole Foods. Like, what are all the ROC SKUs that are like out in market right now?
So if you want to purchase ROC from Whole Foods Market, go to their bulk bins and get any of the rolled oats that are in their bulk bins. So we're
nice.
We are Whole Foods Market exclusive seller of bulk bin oats to them. So
nice.
You can check the tag. It should say Farmer Direct on the tag. So all of those oats in Whole Foods Market bulk bins, they're ROC. And you can also get the Whole Foods Market private label French green lentils and red split lentils. So those are ROC certified.
Hell yeah.
We're launching Farmer Direct branded ROC gluten-free packaged oats in January. So you'll be able to get those in participating natural product retailers, NCG independents, your info retailers, not Whole Foods Market though, because Whole Foods Market has a rule that if you sell them a private label, you can't sell your brand into them.
Yeah.
So, which we didn't know because we were selling branded into Whole Foods Market, and then they pulled us, and we're like, well, what's going on? Oh, we have this policy. And like, okay, well, thanks for telling us. But we weren't that angry or upset because like another tidbit for CPG entrepreneurs is private label all day long. Private label is awesome. At least the Whole Foods Market, you come to a price, you deliver it, they pay you that price. If you have branded product, and it's a guaranteed sale too. If you have branded product, it's just a slotting, so then you have to, there's promotional discounts and there's this and there's that. And like, so the margin for private label is probably better.
I think that's a huge opportunity for regenerative brands, is to offset cash flows through private label. I mean, like that's nothing new. Like there's a lot of good brands that do that, but also if you have some exclusivity in your supply chain, not even necessarily owning it or fully vertically integrated, but like a really high trust, like high touch relationship, like what you have, like it really allows you to maximize the return for yourself, but also the farmers. If you can kind of control the knobs of branded, private label, ingredient sales, right? And like, that's really how you can maximize, I think, the return for everybody, which we have to do.
Totally. And that's straight up truth right there. It's and for us that, we actually care about the farmers. A lot of it is about like, what price do we need to get them? Like, so what's a fair price that incorporates the cost of production plus a reasonable profit margin? Because, I mentioned this to some of our farmers and some of, the people that we do business with in our staff. It's like, I want to be doing business with that farmer's son or daughter in 20 years. Right.
Yeah.
I don't, actually, I really don't want to be doing the same thing in 20 years. We'll see. I want to elevate it a bit. Right. But but the general concept is that, I want to be training someone who's buying grain from that farmer, son or daughter. So, and you just like, I'm just kind of, being a little facetious there, but, it is pretty punishing. It's a difficult job, fraught with all sorts of issues, like just for example, dockage, right? I expressed before about the cleaning, right? And how, the science of the machines that clean grain. Oftentimes, product goes in, it gets over clean. There's too much clean out. Farmer's pissed, right? The plant, doesn't, it is what it is, and not really taking much responsibility for it. Where the farmer sending a lot, had more dockage in his representative sample. There are so many moving parts to this that it's like, it can be punishing. But at the same time, the harder something is, the more foundational the relationships are that you build.
100%. And I can totally relate to that coming up in the fresh produce world. And, our business has been around damn near 100 years at this point, and all those relationships, like I'm selling, before I left, I was selling to the next generation, right, who is now running the store, running the produce department or whatever. And you got to communicate about the bad just as much about the good. So
Yeah.
good segue into the next generation, the future. What does the future hold? More RC SKUs, more bulk business, more infrastructure build out. What's the vision that you're cooking up with the new ownership group?
So ideally, at a certain point in time, we can transition our whole product line in ROC.
Nice.
So, one day I'd like to see that everything we at least brand is ROC and private labels ROC. I think that's possible. We're already there with our oats.
Yeah.
On the specialty crops, it's a bit more challenging. We are actually a victim of our own success, because what happened was that our farmers up here just grow oats like nobody's business. Huge yields. So they probably out yield, say, a lentil by 5 to 1.
Wow.
So it's just really easy for them to grow. And the price was so high that the farmers are like, well, lentils are kind of, they're difficult to grow. And so I'm just going to, put some clover in, or alfalfa, plow down green manure crop instead of putting my lentils in. Yeah. And so we had tons of oats, ROC oats, but then, the supply of the ROC legumes started to dry up a little bit. So I had to go back to the farmers and say, hey guys, what can we do here?
Yeah.
And of course, like, well, if you want us to grow ROC lentils, you got to pay us more. So right in the process of negotiating what that is. The good thing is that at least a preliminary indication is that the market will bear that. And so, that's all about for me too. It's like the work that organic farmers are doing is so tremendously important.
Yeah.
Not only are they bringing airborne carbon and nitrogen, taking these greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere, and they're putting it back into the soil cycle. But they're also, they're not spraying the toxic chemicals, and I think it was the Environmental Working Group. I think they did a study. They basically found out was something like 95% of Americans have Roundup in their urine.
Yeah.
They did another study in, I think, Quebec about pregnant women, the same thing. So it's like, this is getting,
it's a bad deal right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so these are the farmers that are basically cleansing the system of these toxins. So, it's important to support them. It's my job as a food company and marketer to brand that so that consumers know what to support, essentially.
And that's a really interesting challenge, right? Of like, we have to maintain that rotation of cereal, lentil, legume, and the cereal is probably always gonna be worth more. So how do you do that? How do you work with the farmers? How do you tell the retailers that? How do you tell that story to a consumer? Do you not even do all that? And do you just kind of work through it all in the back end? That's a huge piece that I'm sure we could spend a whole hour on in itself.
Oh yeah, for sure. The great thing is, I find though that when you do, can effectively communicate your attributes to organic consumers, that they will support you.
Yeah.
And because it's so before 2002, you had an organic consumer base. Like me, starting organics in '95. After 2002, it really grew.
Yeah.
Now we're looking at 20 years after the NOP. So you have a lot of educated organic consumers that are like, yeah, okay, we kind of understand issues with fraud. We kind of understand, issues with pesticide residue and pollution in the environment. We kind of understand soil fertility and how that relates to nutritional density of food. So that's another thing that, we haven't talked about or isn't necessarily talked about that much in organic.
And that's the unlock, right? Because we think we've done a good job of this food's chemical free, so it's healthy. We have to get to the whole regenerative piece of here's why the soil matters for nutrition and why that should matter to you as the consumer, which we haven't done at scale yet, in my opinion.
Do you want me to break that down? Like, sometimes I explain this to people because they're like, well, what is it? Like, so in very, very basic terms, plants will take sunlight through photosynthesis,
Mm-hmm.
turn that into sugar. The sugars travel down their vascular system to their roots, and and then the root system provides the micro organisms in the soil with the sugar in exchange for vitamins and minerals. And vitamins are just what we call soil-borne vitamins. So photosynthesis, plant creates sugar, exchanges that sugar for nutrients with the microorganisms. That synergistic relationship is really important. And what happens when you use synthetic fertilizer, say synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, that fertilizer goes straight to the roots, and it cuts out that relationship between the microorganisms and the plant roots. So the microorganisms, for that and other reasons, kind of die off, right?
Yeah.
So when the microorganisms in the soil start to die off, there's nothing transferring those micronutrients, so the vitamins and minerals to the plant. So that's why you'll have, like, when you conventionally farm, you'll have plants that are like super high in protein because they have the nitrogen fertilizer, but there's no micronutrients, there's no minerals, and there's no vitamins in the plant. Meanwhile, an organic plant, because if you're doing it properly, the farmer's doing it properly, there'll be a robust community of microorganisms to exchange those nutrients with the plant. And so that's why organic food has been tested by the USDA, by a lot of people, that have higher amounts of micronutrients than conventional farm food. If from the USDA numbers too, since the 1950s, we've lost a tremendous amount of micronutrients in our food.
Yeah.
So like conventionally farmed food. And the other thing too is, like, I'm waiting for consumers to just say, I've had enough. So like, I think that was about 4 weeks ago, went to the grocery store, and there's some strawberries there, and it was from a company that they do, like, say Driscoll's, right? They have their conventional SKU and they have their organic SKU. Well, I used to sometimes occasionally buy the organic SKU until I was like, why am I doing this? This tastes like cardboard. It's fucking garbage, right? And on the conventional end of things, like, I've never tasted a conventional strawberry in the store that tastes like anything. So why are people still buying this garbage? And who's the first retailer that's actually going to come in and say, you know what? We have a minimal brick standard for all fruits and vegetables now.
That'd be very interesting.
Driscoll, if you're sending us your garbage, industrially farmed strawberries that are like, 3 bricks, we don't want them. You have to hit 10 bricks. The issue with that, though, is that, everything's so industrial nowadays that where's that supply going to come from? And my answer to that is, you have to give the farmers a little bit of a chance, right? If the retailers actually are like, no, we don't want this crap, and like, hey, Driscoll's, if you can hit 10 bricks, we'll take your strawberries all day long. But they're not going to be able to, because it's industrial. They're going to have to change their whole production system to do that. And they're also one of the companies too that totally jumped on board the hydroponics is allowed in organics now. Oh, great. Okay, let's start hydroponically. I think they do blueberries. Crazy enough, hydroponically.
They're doing all kinds of stuff. I've sold a lot of strawberries, brother, and I got to tell you that they're usually one of the better ones from a bricks perspective. So I'd push back a little bit on them specifically. But across the board, you're very correct that, the nutrient density has clearly gone down. The flavor has clearly gone down across the board, and especially in the fresh departments. I think the biggest thing for consumers that it's a really good mirage, right? We go in the store right now and all those things are still stocked. There's just a ton of product. It's all really cheap and super available. And we've optimized for appearance across the board a lot. So it all kind of looks really good. So it just like doesn't really make sense. And like the pain's not really there yet. So I don't know how we create that, or, do we just create the alternative that's so much better? Like that's kind of what I'm following.
I think one retailer has to do what they did back in the day with organics, right? When they still do now. They have like an organic section.
Yeah.
Right. Little small organic section. They need to create a section in their store that is 100% just on nutritional testing. Right. Let's bricks, whatever we want. And like, if you hit that, doesn't matter if it's conventional, biodynamic, organic, ROC, you hit a certain bricks level, that's where you go. Now, of course, we're going to find out that, the companies that hit the bricks level, of course, are sourcing ROC, organic, or biodynamic or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Now, you have a really good conventional farmer that's managing their soil really well, and it's picked in season, and it's somewhat local, then you're probably going to see decent bricks. I think in Canada too, we have the issue that I could be wrong. You could tell me this because I'm not in produce. I just think the U.S. gets better produce than us. Like, so it has to travel farther from Canada. And what I realized too, living in Regina, Saskatchewan, is that it's our quality of produce is even worse. I'm trying to turn this off. Sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. I think that's purely a travel issue. Having sent a lot of produce across the center Midwest that still has to travel a decent ways from Florida, California, or Mexico, because that's where we source the majority of stuff, or further south. You just had a geographical challenge there, right? I think that's the biggest issue with that one.
Yeah, so because I did notice that the produce in Saskatchewan is worse than the produce in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And, Vancouver has more local growers too. And, when things are in season, they're always better. But, it's just like you said, where's when are people going to wake up and go well, why am I spending whatever, $8 on a quart of strawberries that don't taste like anything?
Yeah.
Because they look really nice. But it's also the power of marketing. It's the power of perception, right? People look at that strawberry, it looks so beautiful that it actually probably tastes better to them than it really should taste. So, but as people wake up and start demanding more nutrient dense food, that will change. And so, that would be my suggestion to just one retailer out there. Just try that, man. Try to, create a nutritional standard baseline and just have a little space in your store and see if the agricultural supply base can fill that up.
Yeah, it's a good segue into our final question. And, one last thing just to button that up is the most recent generations, they might not even know what a good strawberry tastes like anyway. So we maybe have even lost kind of the litmus test of what we should be applying it to, right? But to take us home, Jason, this has been super fun. Last question that we ask everybody is, and I think you just answered it, but how do we get Regen brands to have 50% market share by 2050? What do we need to do? It's a loaded one, so take a couple breaths with it if you need to.
Yeah, so one of the issues with that is, you're going to have to build the infrastructure for it. So you're either going to have to build the infrastructure for all the different fruit products that arrive on the shelf, or you're going to have to find space with existing infrastructure. So that's two things, right? You need the infrastructure, and the main one is it has to be driven by consumer demand. Consumers absolutely have to demand it. If consumers demand it, I talked to a young conventional farmer. He's out of Manitoba, and he said to me, "Look, we're innovative, man. We can do anything. You guys want us to grow organic? We can grow organic. But the thing is, we just need to know that market's there. If the market's there, we'll do it."
Yeah.
So there's already a lot of tension in the conventional agriculture industry between the input suppliers and the farmers. For example, nitrogen fertilizer went up 400% last season. Went up 400%. That's just crazy. So, the farmers are looking at ways to reduce that. That's, consumers really need to drive the change, and consumers have to push their retailers to drive that change to make it's a cutthroat industry. So the retailers need to cultivate this nascent industry by basically cutting a little bit of slack, right? So that's consumer drive that demand, and it will change.
Yeah. And what I heard in that answer was every single part of the supply chain, right? Working together better, the consumer spurring a difference. And then I heard farmer, I heard middle supply chain infrastructure, I heard distributor retailer, I heard brand, and I heard consumer. That's everybody. And really, we need intervention at all of those, and we need them all together at the same time versus trying to make one happen versus the other. It has to all kind of happen at once, which I think is the big challenge on all the sides,
And
especially on the capital side, because it's like really hard to tell that story to those capital providers
totally.
that like we need that whole thing all at once.
And we need, and you know, to encapsulate that, what is that? It's a cultural change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that cultural change? We have to stop looking at food as drug, because we really do, right? All the refined sugar and flours, like, you know, people eat for emotional reasons. You know, sugar gets you high. You know, sugar is a drug, right? Just because it's been around so long, we're like, oh, what's a little bit of sugar?
Yeah.
It's a drug. It works. Refined sugar works on your body physiologically like any drug does. Okay. It hits your brain centers, which release like pleasure hormones, right? And so people really like don't necessarily look at food as something that you get your nutrients from. They're looking at food as something that's pleasurable. It's almost like, you know, it's drug-like. That needs to change because people are sick. You know, it's obvious. You know, people are very sick. The levels of chronic disease in our society are crazy, and it's really for two reasons. One is the food we're eating, and our sedentary lifestyles.
Yeah,
there's definitely an emotional component to food. Okay, but you know, the physical components are sedentary lifestyle, and our food is a nutrient deplete.
Yeah.
So culturally, we need to demand more. Culturally, we actually need to start eating food because it heals us and it makes us grow, and it satiates the body what it needs for nutrients. So once we get to that cultural shift, then I think we'll start to see real change, because people will, you know, they'll make decisions based on different parameters, and just like, well, you know, if we throw a bunch of sugar in this, people are going to eat it. You know, which
the
is
culture,
like, even in the organic, even the organic industry, right? Yeah, the culture and agriculture, totally. So
that's a good place to wrap it, man. I appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's awesome being here. Thanks for the invite. It's really fun.
For show notes, episode transcripts, and more information on our guests and what we discuss on the show, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also find our Regen recaps on the website. Regen recaps take less than 5 minutes to read and cover all the key points of the full hour-long conversations. You can check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands Podcast, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to future episodes, and share the show with your friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Regen Brands Podcast, brought to you by the Regen Coalition and Outlaw Ventures. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.